I am kneeling at the edge of a wheat field in central Ukraine, late summer, and the light is the slow gold of an afternoon that does not want to end. The soil between my fingers is cool, almost greasy, dark as the inside of a wet stove. I press my thumb into it, and the print stays. A small, perfect hollow that will outlast me by an hour, perhaps two. Here, they call it chornozem, black earth. You have eaten it, you have not seen it. A loaf of bread on a table in Cairo. A bowl of noodles in Jakarta. A child in Tunis tearing flatbread in half. None of them know this field exists. None of them know the woman who walks its edge at dawn with a cloth over her hair. The wind moves through the wheat, and the grain ticks against itself, dry and patient. This is a village in central Ukraine. I will not give you its name yet. The earth in my hand feeds 400 million strangers. It does not ask to be thanked. The print holds, sharp at the edges. The soil keeps the shape of my thumb the way wet clay does. This is chornozem, black earth, the richest soil on the planet, and you are looking at a few grams of it in a stranger's hand. It runs in a long belt across the map, from central Ukraine, east through southern Russia, and into the northern steppes of Kazakhstan, the largest continuous body of fertile soil on Earth. Roughly a quarter of it lies inside this country. You can dig down a full meter here before the black gives way to anything paler. In some fields, more. The topsoil is so deep that a plow does not reach the bottom of it in a single season. It took tens of thousands of years to make. Glacial winds laid down silt at the end of the last ice age. Steppe grass grew, died, and folded itself back into the ground. Cold winters slowed the decay. Carbon stayed, roots stayed. Year by year, the grass became earth. A few centimeters of this soil take 1,000 years to form. The meter under my hand is older than most written history. And here is the paradox. The map will not tell you. The most generous soil on the planet sits inside one of the most contested corridors in human history. Mongols rode across it. Ottomans pressed into it. Empires came again and again for this dirt. Wars are still being fought over it. The soil feeds people who will never see this field. Bread baked in Cairo. Flour milled outside Jakarta. Around 400 million strangers, eating from a country most of them could not place on a map. I fold the soil back into the earth. I stand. The road south begins at the edge of the field. The journey south from Kiev begins on a train that smells of diesel and tea. I sit by the window. The capital thins in 20 minutes. By the second hour, the country has flattened into something older than any city. Sunflower fields begin south of the capital and do not stop. Mile after mile, they hold their heads at the same angle, like a congregation in prayer that has forgotten the prayer. You learn the geography by what disappears. First, the high-rises, then the billboards. Until what remains is a horizon so level it feels engineered. At a regional station, I change to a bus. Soviet era, the kind whose seats remember every passenger who has ever sat in them. The road turns to gravel after the second village. Dust rises behind a grain truck ahead of us and hangs there, the color of weak tea, refusing to settle. A checkpoint, concrete blocks, sandbags, a soldier in summer fatigues. He takes my papers. He glances at the photograph, then at my face, then back. He hands them over. He says nothing. Ukraine is the largest exporter of sunflower oil in the world. I think of this as we pass another field, then another, the heads ticking against each other in a wind I cannot feel through the glass. Most of these fields are not what they appear to be. They are private small holdings, long leased to cooperatives that consolidate them into a single horizon. One field on paper, 100 families behind it. Since the war, the grain leaves by other roads, down the Danube, west through Poland. Routes that did not exist 3 years ago, now carrying bread to cities that have always assumed it would arrive. The bus drops me at a crossroads with no sign. A dirt track leads into a village of low houses and blue-painted gates. A stork's nest sits on a power pole, empty for the season. I step down. The dust settles on my eyelashes. The country is silent. The work is not. The village wakes before I do, a rooster first, then a dog answering another dog 3 yards over, then the diesel cough of a combine starting somewhere past the houses. I walk out at first light. The road is unpaved, the dust still cool. A woman in a headscarf sweeps her yard with a stiff broom. She nods. She does not stop. The sweeping has a rhythm older than any greeting I could offer. The houses end without ceremony. No fence. No final hedge. One step the road, the next step the field. The wheat begins at the edge of the cabbage rows, as if a farmer simply ran out of garden and kept going. You do not understand the size of a Ukrainian field until you stand at the edge of one. Some are larger than entire municipalities in Western Europe. The horizon is wheat. The horizon behind you is also wheat. A kitchen door is open. I am waved in. On the windowsill, a glass jar of sunflower oil. The morning passes through it, the color of honey held to a lamp, a loaf of dark bread on a cloth, salt in a small dish. The farmer is older than his hands suggest. He does not give his name, and I do not ask for it. He gestures at the truck in the yard. He is going to the field. I can ride. The cab smells of cut grain and machine oil. The seat is warm from the sun. The truck pulls out of the village and onto a track that runs straight as a ruler between two walls of gold. He drives for 12 kilometers and never leaves the field. The combine is already working at the far edge. From here, it looks like a slow ship. A header wider than a country lane chews through the wheat at walking pace, and the sparrows scatter ahead of it in small gray waves. A combine in harvest season runs 16 hours a day. The driver sleeps in shifts. The grain does not wait. Above the engine, I hear a thin sound rise and fall. An air raid siren from a town beyond the trees. The farmer does not look up. He keeps driving. The siren ends. Cut grain. Machine oil. The iron tang of dry soil through the open window. Wheat heads brushing the wrist when I rest my arm on the door. I look back the way the truck came. The village is a small island. The grain is the sea. The grain is the sea, and the sea has a memory. To understand this soil, you have to understand what made it. Tens of thousands of years ago, glaciers ground the rock of Eurasia into silt. The wind carried that silt south and laid it across the steppe in pale, patient sheets. Grass grew, grass died. Cold winters held the carbon in the ground instead of letting it burn off in heat. Layer upon layer, century upon century, the steppe wrote itself into the earth, a few centimeters every 1,000 years. This is the slowest manufacturing on the continent. And because the soil was so generous, everyone came for it. Mongols rode across it. Ottomans pressed at its southern edge. Tsars settled it. Nazis invaded for it. The map of Ukraine is, in one reading, simply the map of who has tried to own this dirt. In the early 1930s, the Soviet state did something almost impossible to hold in the mouth. They starved the people who lived on the richest soil in Europe. It is called the Holodomor, the killing by hunger. Quotas were set higher than the harvest. Grain was confiscated down to the seed. Villages were sealed. Roads were closed. Lists were kept of those who failed to meet quota. And lists were kept of those who tried to leave. Millions died. In 1932 and 1933, in kitchens with cold stoves and empty cupboards, on land that could feed a continent, the fields kept producing. That was the cruelty of it. The earth did not stop. In a quiet museum, in a drawer, there are receipts on yellowed paper for grain that was taken. The paper is dry as a leaf. A decade later, German freight trains rolled west out of Ukraine, carrying topsoil itself. Not just the grain, the black earth, shoveled into boxcars, hauled across the border as cargo. The dirt was so valuable that it was looted like silver. If this letter is reaching you, leave a mark in the comments. Tell me one place that has stayed with you. I read every reply. Now, back to the village. After independence, Ukraine spent years arguing about whether this soil could be sold at all. The moratorium on the sale of farmland held for decades. To own a piece of the black earth for a generation was almost forbidden by law, as if the country were trying to protect the soil from being taken again, this time by paper. And then the recent war. Ports on the Black Sea blockaded, silos hit, fields mined to a depth no plow can reach. Wheat futures spike on screens in cities where no one has ever held a stalk of grain. Demining the cropland is a national project now, measured not in months, but in decades. Some of these fields will not be safe to walk in my lifetime. And still, this season, the combines run. 16 hours a day, sirens in the distance. Grain moving by rail to the Polish border, by barge down the Danube, by whatever route is open this week. The soil keeps producing. It does not ask who suffered for it. Her hands are stained at the knuckles. Beetroot, the dark red of a wound that has finished bleeding. She is somewhere past 70, maybe 80. I do not ask. She has sown the same plot of garden, behind the same blue gate, every spring for more than 50 years. She does not introduce herself. She just opens the door wider and steps aside. The summer kitchen is a small room of its own, separate from the house. A masonry stove takes up one wall, a pitch, whitewashed, warm to the back of the hand. Borscht is simmering in a low pot. Beet, cabbage, carrot, dill. The smell is thicker than the air. She sets 2 bowls. She opens a jar of pickled tomatoes for the guest. Neither of us speaks for a long time. When she does speak, she does not speak of herself. She speaks of her father. He survived the famine, she says, by eating boiled clover. She lets that sit on the table between us. She points through the kitchen window to a corner of the garden. There is a cherry tree there, old, knotted. He buried seed grain there, she says, under the tree, so they would not find it. I do not need to ask who they were. The history of this soil already answered. She tells me he dug it up the next spring, a handful at a time, enough to start again. Outside, somewhere past the field, a combine starts up and then idles down. I ask if she is afraid of the war. She looks at me as if I had asked whether the rain was wet. She shrugs. I have been afraid before, she says. It does not change the planting. A clock ticks on the shelf. A fly tests the screen door. The borscht cools between us. Before I leave, she goes to a wooden drawer beside the stove. She takes out a small linen bag, no bigger than a fist. She has tied it with brown twine. She presses it into my hand. Seeds from her garden, saved the way her mother saved them, and her grandmother before that. Plant them somewhere quiet, she says. That is all. I stand in her doorway with the bag in my palm. It weighs almost nothing. It weighs everything I have carried from the train, from the field, from the cherry tree at the corner of the garden where a man once buried grain to keep his children alive. The light through the doorway is the same light that has been falling on this kitchen for 100 years. Soft, dust-flecked. She does not wave when I go. She returns to the stove. She lifts the lid. She stirs once, slowly, and sets it back. I walk to the gate. I do not look back until the gate is closed behind me. In my pocket, the linen bag presses against my hip the way a small animal presses against its keeper. Alive, quiet. I had come for the soil, for the statistics, for the long belt of black earth that feeds strangers across the sea. I leave with a bag of seeds from a woman whose name I will not write down, because she did not give it. This is what I came to find. The walk back to the field is long enough to think. The bag of seeds rides in my coat pocket, linen against the lining, almost weightless. A few grams of grain, the color of straw. I came here expecting a story about soil, about a country that exports more wheat than most continents grow, about the geometry of fields and the price of bread on a screen in a city far from the dirt that made it. I am leaving with a smaller story, and a heavier one. The blue hour comes on slowly here. The wheat goes from gold to silver to gray, in that order, without hurry. Somewhere a dog barks once and stops. A combine sits parked at the edge of the road, its engine cooling, the metal clicking as it lets go of the day's heat. I stop at the place where I began. The same field, the same earth. The 400 million strangers will eat tonight. In Cairo, in Tunis, in flats above bakeries that open before dawn, they will tear bread and pass it across a table, and not once will they think of a blue gate, a tiled stove, a cherry tree, with seed grain buried beneath it in the famine years. They are not supposed to. That is not how the chain works. But the chain is shorter than you think. From this soil to the truck, from the truck to the silo, from the silo to the port, from the port to the mill, from the mill to the oven, from the oven to your hand. 6 links, maybe 7. You may have eaten her wheat this week, and you will never meet her. She does not need you to. This is what the soil teaches, if you stand on it long enough. Abundance is not the same as ease. Generosity has a cost, and the cost is paid quietly, in kitchens with tile stoves, by people who do not write their names on what they grow. We eat at the end of a chain we did not build. We forget this almost completely. We are allowed to. But once in a long while, a letter arrives. A handful of grain in a linen bag, a blue gate, a name not given, and the world becomes briefly smaller. And you find that you are holding a thumbprint of soil from a place you will never visit, and somehow it has been feeding you all along. The guest house is one room, a bed, a table, a lamp with a cracked glass shade. I sit down to finish the letter. The page is half written in pencil, and I do not change a word. I fold it once. Then again, the linen bag of seeds I tuck inside the second fold, against the paper, so it will travel with the letter wherever the letter goes. The wax sits in a small tin, dark as dried beetroot. I hold a match to it until it softens. Then tilt the stick over the seam. The seal is a compass rose. I press it and lift. The impression blooms in the wax. 4 points. The dirt of a central Ukrainian field still under my thumbnail. I blow out the lamp. Somewhere. A next letter is already beginning. A place I will not name yet. Only a hint. An island in a cold sea, where the houses are the color of weather. Until the next letter.